When he was running for re-election in 1992, President George H.W. Bush famously flubbed an answer at one of the presidential debates. He was up there with Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. Remember 1992? Ross Perot, right? It was a town hall style debate where regular people got to ask questions of the candidates. And a woman at that town hall asked President Bush a question about the national debt. And he just didn't understand the question. And he started to answer it, and she interrupted him. She was like, no, that wasn't my question. Then the moderator tried to help explain what the woman had been asking. And then President Bush tried again, and the woman was again like, no, you didn't get it. You didn't listen to my question. It was very awkward. It was very tense. It went on for a long time. And Ross Perot and Bill Clinton, did what they're supposed to do. They just sat there, let it go on and on and on while the moment got worse and worse and worse and more tense. Poppy Bush at the time was the sitting president of the United States running for re-election, right? So him screwing up like that at a debate, it was a consequential thing. It was a big deal in that campaign. The way that moment was crystallized in politics, though, the way it is remembered even now, is not so much the back and forth that President Bush had with the woman and the moderator there. It's the way the question happened. The way that that moment is crystallized sort of in political science and political how-to, even now, is that while that young woman was asking President Bush her question, this question that he didn't understand, at that time, President Bush was ostentatiously checking his watch. She was asking him a question, and he was, are we almost done here? I got places to be. I got stuff to do. Do not check your watch when you are running for president, especially not when you're in a room full of regular people who are already suspicious that maybe you're not all that psyched about being there with them, among the hoi polloi. Don't do it. That's become the rule ever since then, right? Nobody knew it had to be a rule until he did it. But that's the rule. Don't check your watch. Don't check your watch. Resist the urge to check your watch.
Medicine has always been my dream as a youngster, and fortunately, living in this country, I was able to realize that dream. And our government is incredibly inefficient at this stage right now. We need to think about that as we go forward.
Don't check your watch. Poppy Bush never lived down checking it once. So certainly don't check it 1, 2, 3, ultimately 4 times in a speech that lasts only 8 minutes. But that's what happened in Iowa this weekend. Retired neurosurgeon, declared Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson apparently had somewhere to be, had a plane to catch. It's possible that this is some of what he was needing to go home to deal with. The Washington Post reporting that Dr. Carson's presidential campaign has just had a mass staff exodus. His campaign chairman, his deputy campaign manager, his national finance chair, and his general counsel have all just quit the Ben Carson for President campaign. The deputy campaign manager apparently quit to return to his farm. The Washington Post says he is a, quote, part-time lawyer and farmer. He longed to return to his estate. As for the general counsel, a Carson spokesman explained to the Post that she, quote, grew tired of the political game. She's now in Africa on a safari. When's the last time a campaign's top lawyer left in the middle of a presidential campaign with their candidate polling in the top 5 nationally, sometimes in the top 3? Left in the middle of that campaign because they suddenly needed to go on a safari. You think you've covered everything in politics, and then one of Dr. Carson's last remaining staffers, though, his business manager, does have a public explanation for all this, for the general counsel going on safari and the deputy campaign manager going back to his farm and the overall campaign manager quitting too and the national finance chairman quitting all at once. The official explanation from what remains of the Ben Carson for President team is this, and I quote, "Things happen, man. That's the way life works. Things do happen." Ben Carson right now, he doesn't get top-tier media coverage, but he is a top-tier Republican presidential contender. An average of recent polls puts him at number 4 nationally. There's lots of guys and even one gal behind him among the Republican contenders. Based on the new running tally they're now posting at the Wall Street Journal, keeping track of the national polls and who's likely to be even invited onto the stage for the first presidential debates, there are a lot of people way more well-known than Ben Carson in the Republican field who are not only running behind Ben Carson, but they're running so far back in the pack, they're likely to not even make it into the debates when the Republicans finally get around to debating. All that makes it all the more remarkable that Ben Carson, number 4 in the national polls right now, basically has nobody running his campaign. No wonder the man's in a hurry, right? He has stuff to do. He has to find a campaign chair and a deputy campaign chair and a national finance chair and a general counsel. Only candidates with no immediate safari plans need to apply. Things happen, man. Things happen. Things also happen, apparently, to Jeb Bush. Watch this. This is NBC's Chris Jansing with Jeb Bush in Germany today. Watch this.
Governor, why did you replace your campaign manager, Governor? Governor, can you say why you replaced your campaign manager?
Tomorrow, when we have our president.
Was something not working properly?
Everything's great.
Everything's great. That was former Florida Governor Jeb Bush today on the first day of one of these turbo foreign trips that candidates make abroad, particularly when they don't have any international experience. These kind of trips are supposed to show that they can handle themselves well in foreign countries. Jeb Bush was in Germany today. He's also due to make stops in Poland and in Estonia on this trip. But right before leaving for this foreign trip, the Bush folks announced that Jeb Bush would be replacing his campaign manager too, just like Ben Carson. And they're otherwise shaking up the whole top tier of the Jeb Bush for President staff. And that kind of thing is never good news for a campaign, right? Nobody ever fires their campaign manager because their campaign is going great. The New York Times describing turmoil in Jeb Bush's organization. The Washington Post saying the change was, quote, a frank acknowledgement that Bush's 6-month exploratory phase has not met expectations. At Politico.com, they said the move showed that Governor Bush was, quote, struggling to establish his own brand and regain his footing. There was no clear manager to keep the trains running on time. Quote, the surprise move came after several tumultuous weeks for Bush and amid recent polling that suggested his standing has fallen both in national polls and in the key early state of Iowa. Iowa is important here. The guy who was just fired as Jeb Bush's campaign manager was an Iowa guy, longtime Iowa Republican operative. Even with this Iowa guy serving as Jeb Bush's campaign manager, though, Jeb Bush is not running well in Iowa at all. He's running 9 points behind Scott Walker in Iowa right now. He's even running behind Marco Rubio there. He's even running behind Mike Huckabee there. And in this giant Republican presidential race, this giant field, I mean, 4th is probably an exciting place to be if you're somebody who most people have never heard of. But if you're Jeb Bush and you're supposed to be running as the prohibitive shock and awe frontrunner, if that's basically your determined path to the nomination, that you'll scare other people out of the race, with more than $100 million already raised and all the rest of it, 4th in Iowa right now pretty much stinks. And so his campaign manager from Iowa is fired. I think the idea was that they could sort of shorten the shelf life of this Jeb Bush in trouble story, right? They shortened the shelf life of this story by announcing it ahead of his European trip. They didn't count on reporters like Chris Jansing chasing him down to ask him questions about it, even while he was in Germany, you know, even with Angela Merkel there in the background, right? I mean, you can take the candidate out of the country. You cannot take the candidate out of the news cycle. Not anymore. In the 2016 presidential race, though, there is one other candidate for whom there is an unusual dynamic concerning Jeb Bush's father, the former president, and also Jeb Bush's brother, the former president. Because in 2004, when President George W. Bush was running for re-election as president, there was one Republican U.S. senator at the time who said that even though he was a Republican, and George W. Bush was a Republican, and George W. Bush was running for re-election, he, the senator, would not support the re-election of George W. Bush. He said instead that when he went to vote on Election Day in 2004, he would write in the name George H.W. Bush. He would cast a write-in ballot that year for W's dad, but not for W. And he was a serving Republican U.S. senator at the time. As a Republican U.S. senator, he was also pro-choice. He was pro-gay rights. He was pro-marriage equality for same-sex couples. He was against the death penalty. He supported raising the minimum wage. He supported higher taxes on the rich. He was against drilling in the Arctic. As a Republican U.S. Senator, he not only voted against the fiscally disastrous George W. Bush tax cuts for the rich, he also voted in 2002 against authorizing the U.S. war in Iraq. He was the only Republican senator who voted against George W. Bush's war in Iraq. He was, of course, Republican U.S. Senator Lincoln Chafee, who was the last known living specimen on Earth of the liberal Republican. When he left the Republican Party in 2007, the whole idea of a liberal Republican went extinct. By 2007, he had left the Republican Party. He became an independent. By 2008, he was an independent, endorsing Democrat Barack Obama over John McCain for president. By 2012, he was the independent governor of Rhode Island, who was serving as Barack Obama's national campaign co-chair in President Obama's re-election effort. By 2013, Lincoln Chafee had officially become a Democrat. In 2014, he said he would not run for re-election as Rhode Island governor. And then last week, he announced that he would run himself for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. Last month, excuse me. And that was not exactly the most expected move on earth when he said he was running for president. But then Lincoln Chafee has always done things a little differently. He's always prided himself on not being particularly predictable. Joining us now for the interview is Lincoln Chafee, the only Republican senator who voted against the Iraq War. He has since become an independent and a Democrat. He served as a mayor, a senator, and a governor. He's now the fourth candidate this year to declare a run for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. Governor Chafee, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Rachel.
When I talk about your transformation from Republican to independent to Democrat, are you proud of that transformation, about leaving those party labels behind? Do you worry that Democratic primary voters might hold that against you?
Yes, but my record and my convictions are open to scrutiny, and on the issues that you so clearly articulated, whether it's the environment or fiscal responsibility or civil liberties or aversion to quagmires overseas, I've been consistent over my 30 years. So whether I've been a Republican or an independent or a Democrat, you can look at my voting record, and it hasn't been flip-flopping. It's completely consistent on the key issues that Democrats care about that you just talked about.
So you feel like you've stayed this...
more.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The only Republican to vote against Sam Alito for the Supreme Court.
Oh, right. Yes, I should.
And a lot of 5-4 votes with Justice Alito casting that fifth vote, Citizens United being the most infamous.
But you feel like you've essentially stayed who you are and believed in the same principles and the same things in terms of policy all along, but you feel like party affiliations have shifted around you.
Yes, absolutely. And the Republican Party moved more to the South. The priorities became, as the Southerners switched from being Democrats, the solid South was Democrat, became Republican. The priorities for the Republican Party changed. They weren't my priorities. I'm fiscally responsible and socially let people live as they want to live, liberal. Let me
ask you about the Iraq War vote. I know that you've explained that as really central to your thinking about why it's important for you to be in this race. When you cast that vote against the Iraq War in 2002, you were Republican at the time. Your whole party basically lost their minds. They were so mad at you. I remember Vice President Cheney used to call in to talk radio in Rhode Island to try to make your own constituents mad at you. Was that a hard decision for you to make? Did it cost you anything at the time?
I had set my path prior to even the October of 2002 vote against many of the Bush initiatives that you talked about earlier, the tax cuts being the early one. So my Republican colleagues started to understand Link's going to stand up for his convictions. And they actually understood that I felt strongly about this. I went to the CIA. I saw everything they had on weapons of mass destruction. I was not convinced. I came back to my Republican colleagues and I said, this is insanity. But just the train was going down the tracks, and you're considered unpatriotic if you weren't going to support this war. People were angry, obviously, after September 11th. They're scared, and those are two dangerous emotions. So, yes, that was not a hard vote for me. There was a lot of pressure, obviously, back home. Everybody's mad at me for not supporting what they thought was weapons of mass destruction. But I just didn't believe it. And when you said I voted against George W. Bush, or I did not vote for him in 2004, I learned not to trust that administration. Based on the campaign promises they made. Governor Bush at the time said, I'm going to be united, not a divider. We're going to regulate carbon dioxide, the climate change pollutant. We're going to have a humble foreign policy. And all those things, when they came to govern, were the opposite. very arrogant, not humble at all, very divisive. And the first thing they did was get rid of any pretext that we're going to regulate carbon dioxide. In fact, they're going to have clean air rollbacks. So I didn't trust them. And that was another factor in me not wanting to vote for the war and for him.
When I look at the Republican field this year, obviously the first thing that strikes you is it's giant. If you had to pick who was going to win based on money alone, you might guess that Jeb Bush is going to end up being their nominee. I mean, you famously, picked the elder George Bush over the younger George Bush when it came to your own preferences and who you felt like did a better job as president. Do you have any sense of which of them Jeb Bush is more like? If he ends up being the nominee, do you think it would be a second George W. Bush presidency, or do you think he'd be more like his dad?
Those Republican primaries really pull you, as everybody knows, way to the extreme. And John McCain saw that. He was unsuccessful in 2000. So then we came back in 2008. He was a different John McCain, completely different from the way he had been as a senator in order to appeal to these primary voters. Then Mitt Romney, governor of Massachusetts, northeastern New England state, where he governed well and instituted a health care initiative, had to change his policies. And Americans don't like flip-floppers. So those Republican primaries make it difficult for the nominee then to appeal to those purple states.
So do you think that Jeb Bush is running more to the right than he actually would govern as if he got elected?
Absolutely. You can already see it.
Can I ask you a weird Jeb Bush question? You can tell me if you don't want to answer.
Sure.
I think, and I might be wrong, that you went to Andover with Jeb Bush. Were you classmates?
Yes.
Did you
we
know
were in
him?
the same dorm together.
Really?
Yes.
What did you think of him? Were you friends?
Yes, we were friends.
Really?
Yes. So it's a strange world, isn't it?
It is a strange world. I mean, have you maintained a friendship?
Not really. No.
Yeah.
He went off and married Columba his senior year, or met her junior year, and then was in love all through his senior year, and that's all we talked about, and then married his freshman year in college and did a different life. But we've crossed paths since.
Yeah, and you may yet. One last question for you. Bernie Sanders on this show said that he wants to not only debate more and debate earlier, he wants to debate Republicans before either party has a nominee. Do you like that idea?
No, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Let them get their issues out on their side, and let us get ours on our side. And there's so much to talk about on our side, I think, and where we're going in the world, and these endless wars, just endless wars. And the Republicans are in that direction. I think Democrats need a nominee that wants to stop these endless wars and redirect those resources to more beneficial uses at home: education, infrastructure, health care. So many good areas that we could be spending that money.
Lincoln Chafee, you are an unpredictable person in your political choices, and it's fun to talk to you because I never have any idea what direction you're going to go, and you always make sense.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. It's nice to see you.
Fun to talk to you, too.
See, I want everybody who's running for president to come spend some time here. It can be fun. It can be fun. It's only very mildly interrupty. I'm telling you, you'll have a good time if you come here. Talk to Lincoln Chafee about it. Talk to Bernie Sanders about it. They have both survived. It's been fun. Everybody should do this. I'll be right back.